The morning sun cast long shadows across the Navy base as Marcus Sullivan walked through the parking lot, his 8-year-old daughter Emma's hand firmly in his. She clutched her backpack with both hands, nervous about her first day at the new school on base. Marcus had been dreading this moment for weeks, not because of Emma's school anxiety, but because today marked his return to active duty after 2 years of single parenthood. "Daddy, will you pick me up today?" Emma asked, looking up at him with the same green eyes that had belonged to her mother, Sarah. The familiar pang of loss hit Marcus like it did every morning when he saw those eyes. "I'll be right here at 3 o'clock, sweetheart. I promise," he said, kneeling down to fix her crooked collar. "Mrs. Henderson will walk you to the pickup spot just like we practiced yesterday." Emma nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, she had already learned to be braver than most adults. Losing her mother to cancer when she was 6 had forced both of them to grow up fast. Marcus had left the SEALs then, choosing to be a full-time father over his military career. But financial pressures and Emma's need for stability had brought them back to the Navy, this time in a different capacity. After dropping Emma off, Marcus made his way to the administrative building where he would begin his new role as a logistics coordinator. It wasn't the adrenaline-filled missions he was used to, but it paid the bills and kept him close to Emma. The transition from special operations to desk work felt like trading a Ferrari for a bicycle, but Emma's smile made it worthwhile. The hallways buzzed with familiar military efficiency. Sailors moved with purpose, their uniforms crisp and their conversations clipped and professional. Marcus found himself automatically scanning faces, a habit from his SEAL days when recognizing friend from foe could mean the difference between life and death. Well, if it isn't the famous Iron Ghost," a voice boomed from behind him. Marcus turned to see Admiral James Richardson approaching with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Richardson was known throughout the Navy as a tough leader who had climbed the ranks through political maneuvering rather than field experience. He commanded respect through his position, but those who had served in combat knew the difference between earned and inherited authority. "Admiral Richardson," Marcus replied with a neutral tone, offering a crisp salute. Years of military training kept his expression blank despite the irritation building in his chest. "I heard you were coming back to us," Richardson continued, his voice carrying just enough volume to attract the attention of nearby personnel. "Though I have to say, I was surprised to learn that the legendary Iron Ghost had traded his rifle for a clipboard and his missions for diaper duty." The comment hit its mark. Several junior officers slowed their pace, pretending to check their phones while actually listening to the exchange. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. He had faced enemy fire in 3 different countries, survived missions that would break most men, and earned his call sign through actions that remained classified. But none of that seemed to matter when faced with the casual cruelty of a superior officer making jokes about his life choices. "Iron Ghost," Richardson continued, seeming to savor the words. "What kind of call sign is that anyway? Sounds like something from a video game. I always wondered if you special operations types just made up dramatic names to impress people at parties." The hallway had grown quieter now. Even the busy sailors had slowed their pace, sensing the tension in the air. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see how he would respond to the Admiral's public challenge. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, but all were watching. Marcus had earned his call sign during his 3rd deployment in Afghanistan. His team had been tasked with a reconnaissance mission that went sideways when they stumbled into an enemy compound. Outnumbered and outgunned, Marcus had single-handedly held off an entire squad of insurgents while his teammates evacuated wounded civilians. He had moved through that compound like a phantom, appearing and disappearing, taking out targets with surgical precision. When the smoke cleared, 12 enemy combatants lay dead, and Marcus had vanished into the night without a trace, earning him the nickname that would follow him for the rest of his career. But those details were classified, locked away in files that Admiral Richardson would never see. The families of the civilians Marcus had saved that night would never know his real name, and the teammates whose lives he had preserved were scattered across different assignments. The only proof of his heroism existed in reports that few people had clearance to read. "Every call sign has a story, Admiral," Marcus replied carefully, his voice steady despite the fire burning in his chest. "Some stories are just worth more than others." Richardson's smile faltered slightly at the quiet confidence in Marcus's voice, but he pressed on. I'm sure it does. Though I imagine the story behind changing diapers and attending parent-teacher conferences might be a bit different than whatever got you that dramatic nickname. The words stung because they carried a grain of truth that Marcus struggled with every day. He had gone from being one of the most elite soldiers in the world to packing lunch boxes and braiding hair. Some mornings he looked in the mirror and wondered if he had lost himself completely in the transformation from warrior to single father. But then he would remember Emma's laugh, the way she ran to him when she had nightmares, how she had held his hand during Sarah's funeral and told him they would take care of each other. Being her father was the most important mission he had ever accepted, even if it meant sacrificing the identity he had built over 15 years of military service. Parenthood is the most important operation any of us can undertake, Admiral, Marcus said quietly. The success rate matters more than the glory. Richardson let out a short laugh. That's a nice way to put it, Iron Ghost. Very philosophical, though I have to wonder if you miss the real action or if you're content playing house for the rest of your career. The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Around them, the hallway had returned to its normal bustle, but Marcus could still feel eyes on him, still sense the judgment and curiosity of his new colleagues. Some of them probably wondered the same thing Richardson had voiced aloud. What was a decorated SEAL doing pushing papers and raising a little girl? Marcus thought about Emma's face that morning, how she had hugged him extra tight before walking into her new classroom. He thought about the sleepless nights when she called out for her mother, and how he had learned to braid her hair by watching YouTube videos. He thought about the sacrifice Sarah had made, fighting cancer with the same determination he had once brought to combat, and how her last words had been a request for him to give Emma a normal, peaceful childhood. I don't miss anything that keeps me away from what matters most, sir, Marcus answered, his voice carrying a finality that suggested the conversation was over. But Admiral Richardson wasn't finished. He had an audience now, and his position gave him the power to push boundaries that others couldn't cross. Well, I suppose that's admirable in its own way, Richardson said with a patronizing tone. Though I can't help but think the Navy might be wasting your talents in logistics. Maybe we should find you something more suited to your new lifestyle, perhaps working with the base daycare. I hear they need someone to organize snack time. The insult was delivered with a smile, but its impact rippled through the hallway like a stone thrown into still water. A few people actually gasped at the audacity of the comment, while others looked away in embarrassment for both men. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, a familiar feeling he remembered from moments before crucial missions when everything depended on making the right choice. He could respond with anger, could remind the Admiral that rank didn't erase respect for service and sacrifice. He could walk away, accepting the humiliation as the price of his new life. Or he could do something else entirely, something that would change the trajectory of this moment and everything that followed. Marcus looked at Admiral Richardson for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The hallway around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response to the daycare comment. Instead of anger or defense, something else flickered across Marcus's face. Recognition. You served in the Pentagon during Operation Neptune Spear, didn't you, Admiral? Marcus asked quietly, his tone conversational despite the tension in the air. Richardson's confident smirk faltered slightly. What does that have to do with anything? Just wondering about your operational experience, sir. I noticed your ribbons earlier. Marcus's voice remained calm, almost friendly, but there was something underneath it that made several nearby officers stop pretending to be busy with their phones. I served my country in many capacities, Richardson replied, his defensive tone revealing more than his words. Not everyone needs to run around playing soldier in the desert to make a contribution. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Of course not, sir. Desk work is important too. Someone has to coordinate the real operators from a safe distance. The comment landed like a precision strike. Richardson's face flushed red as he realized he had walked into a trap of his own making. By mocking Marcus's transition to administrative work, he had opened the door for his own lack of combat experience to be questioned. Now see here, Sullivan, Richardson began, but Marcus continued as if he hadn't heard him. I remember reading about some of the Pentagon logistics during that operation. Fascinating stuff. All those moving pieces that had to come together perfectly for the teams on the ground to do their job. Must have been intense, coordinating from the situation room while the operators were actually in the compound. The words were respectful on the surface, but their implication was clear to everyone listening. Richardson had spent his career managing operations from the safety of command centers, while men like Marcus had been doing the actual fighting. The Admiral's attempts to mock Marcus's call sign and current role had backfired spectacularly. "That's enough," Richardson snapped, his composure finally cracking. "You're out of line, sailor." "Am I, sir?" Marcus asked with genuine curiosity. "I was just making conversation about our different types of service, the way you were earlier. I find it interesting how we all contribute in our own ways." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, who had been watching the exchange from near the bulletin board, found herself fighting back a smile. She had heard about Marcus Sullivan's reputation before he left active duty, and seeing him handle Richardson with such surgical precision reminded her why SEALs were considered the best of the best. He wasn't just winning the argument, he was dismantling it piece by piece. Richardson realized he was losing control of the situation. The hallway audience was no longer watching with curiosity, but with barely concealed amusement at his expense. He had started this confrontation to embarrass a subordinate, but somehow found himself on the defensive. "Your attitude is exactly what I would expect from someone who abandoned his oath to play house," Richardson said, his voice rising slightly. "The Navy invested millions in your training, and you walked away the moment things got difficult in your personal life." The comment crossed a line that everyone in the hallway recognized. Military personnel understood sacrifice, understood loss, and understood that sometimes family had to come first. Richardson's implication that Marcus had taken the easy way out was not just wrong. It was insulting to every service member who had faced similar impossible choices. Marcus felt the familiar calm that had always settled over him before critical moments in combat. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet enough that people had to lean in to hear him. "Admiral, my wife died of cancer while I was on deployment. I came home to a 6-year-old daughter who had been staying with neighbors for 3 weeks because I couldn't break operational security to attend the funeral. When I finally made it back, she asked me if I was going to disappear like Mommy did." The hallway had gone completely silent now. Even the ambient noise of the building seemed to fade as Marcus continued. "I had a choice to make. I could continue serving in a way that required me to leave my daughter for months at a time, or I could find a different way to serve that allowed me to be the father she needed. I chose her." Richardson's face had gone pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus wasn't finished. "You want to know about my call sign? About Iron Ghost? I earned it during a mission that went sideways in Kandahar province. My team was extracting civilians from a compromised village when we walked into an ambush. 12 enemy combatants, 2 wounded civilians, and a squad of Navy SEALs with limited ammunition and no backup coming." Marcus's voice remained steady, but there was something in his eyes now that made Richardson take a step back. "I spent 4 hours moving through that compound like a ghost, taking out targets one by one while my team got the civilians to safety. When it was over, every hostile was down, every civilian was alive, and nobody could find me until I radioed in from 3 miles away. They called me Iron Ghost because I was unbreakable and invisible when it mattered most." The story was told without boasting, without drama, just simple facts delivered in the same tone someone might use to describe their morning commute. But the impact was immediate and devastating. Richardson realized he had just publicly mocked a genuine war hero in front of a dozen witnesses. "That mission is classified, so you won't find it in any public records," Marcus continued. "Just like most of the work special operators do, we don't get headlines or recognition ceremonies. We just do the job and move on to the next one." Lieutenant Commander Chen found herself unconsciously straightening her posture. She had read about similar missions in briefings, had seen the sanitized after-action reports that stripped away the human element and reduced heroism to bullet points and statistics. Hearing it described by someone who had lived it was entirely different. "But you know what the most important mission is, Admiral?" Marcus asked, his voice still calm. "Making sure my daughter grows up feeling safe and loved, making sure she never doubts that her father will be there when she needs him. That's worth more than any medal or commendation." Richardson was trapped now, and he knew it. He had initiated a public confrontation with a decorated veteran and single father, and there was no way to emerge from it without looking like a complete fool. His attempts to mock Marcus had instead highlighted his own lack of combat experience and basic human empathy. That's, Richardson stammered, his usual command presence completely evaporated. Marcus took a step closer, not threateningly, but close enough that his next words would be clearly heard by everyone present. You asked if I missed the real action, Admiral. Let me tell you what real action is. Real action is staying up all night with a sick child. Real action is learning to braid hair and pack lunches and help with homework while dealing with your own grief. Real action is choosing love over glory every single day. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Richardson looked around the hallway, seeing faces that had shifted from curiosity to respect, from amusement at his expense to admiration for the man he had tried to humiliate. The Navy didn't lose anything when I moved to logistics, Marcus said quietly. They gained a father who understands what he's really fighting for. With that, Marcus stepped back, offered a crisp salute, and said, If you'll excuse me, Admiral, I have work to do, and a daughter to pick up at 3 o'clock. He turned and walked away, leaving Richardson standing alone in a hallway full of people who would never see him the same way again. Word traveled fast on a military base. By lunchtime, the story of Admiral Richardson's encounter with Marcus Sullivan had spread through the ranks like wildfire. The details grew with each telling, but the core message remained the same. Iron Ghost had made the Admiral look like a fool without raising his voice or breaking military protocol. Marcus found himself at the center of attention he neither wanted nor needed. Junior officers nodded respectfully when they passed him in the corridors. Senior enlisted personnel offered knowing smiles. Even civilian contractors seemed to have heard some version of the story by the time he made it to the commissary for lunch. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen approached his table while he was eating alone, reading reports on his tablet. Mind if I join you? She asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Marcus looked up, recognizing her from the morning's incident. Of course, ma'am, please. Sarah sat down with her tray and studied him for a moment. She was in her early 30s, with intelligent brown eyes and the kind of confidence that came from years of proving herself in a male-dominated field. Her service ribbons indicated deployments to both Iraq and Afghanistan, marking her as someone who had earned her rank through performance rather than politics. That was quite a performance this morning, she said, taking a bite of her salad. Performance? Marcus asked, genuinely confused. I was just answering the Admiral's questions. Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that made several nearby tables turn their heads. Is that what you call it? Because from where I stood, it looked like you systematically dismantled a superior officer's ego using nothing but facts and basic human decency. Marcus set down his sandwich and looked at her seriously. The Admiral made assumptions about my choices and my service. I simply provided context. Context? Sarah repeated, nodding slowly. That's one way to put it. Another way would be to say you reminded everyone in that hallway that there's a difference between commanding respect and earning it. The comment made Marcus uncomfortable. He had never sought to embarrass Richardson, had simply responded to what felt like an attack on his daughter and his choices as a father. The idea that his words had been calculated for maximum impact didn't sit well with him. I didn't mean to cause problems for anyone, Marcus said quietly. I just wanted him to understand that some decisions are bigger than military protocol. Sarah leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Can I ask you something, off the record? Marcus nodded. Do you regret it, leaving the SEALs for Emma? The question hit deeper than Richardson's mockery had. Marcus had asked himself the same thing every day for the past 2 years, especially during the difficult times when Emma was struggling with her mother's death, and he felt completely out of his depth as a single parent. Every parent makes sacrifices, he said finally. I gave up one kind of service for another. Some days I wonder if I made the right choice, but then I remember that Emma didn't choose to lose her mother. She deserved to have at least one parent who put her first. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I have a 7-year-old daughter myself. Her father is deployed with the Marines right now, has been for 8 months. Sometimes I wonder if we're all just passing our children around like military equipment, hoping someone else will handle the parenting while we handle the mission. The admission surprised Marcus. He had assumed that other military parents had found some perfect balance he was missing, some way to excel at both soldiering and parenting without compromise. It's different for everyone, he said. Your daughter has you here stable and present, that's what matters. But for how long? Sarah asked. I've got orders coming up next year. Could be Norfolk, could be San Diego, could be overseas. And then what? Do I drag her across the country again, or do I make the same choice you made? Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. The school number appeared on his screen, and his blood immediately ran cold. Schools only called during the day when something was wrong. Excuse me, he said to Sarah, answering the phone quickly. This is Marcus Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, this is Principal Martinez at Oceanside Elementary. Emma is fine, but there's been an incident we need to discuss. Could you come in this afternoon? Marcus felt his stomach drop. What kind of incident? Is she hurt? She's not hurt, but she got into a fight with another student. We need to have a conference about the school's anti-bullying policies and Emma's response to the situation. A fight? His 8-year-old daughter had been in a fight on her first day at a new school. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining all the ways this could complicate their fresh start on the base. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, already standing and gathering his things. Sarah looked up at him with concern. Everything okay? Emma got into a fight at school. I have to go. Do you need backup? Sarah asked, surprising him with the offer. Sometimes these conferences go better when the parent has another adult present. Marcus paused, considering the offer. He had been handling everything alone for so long that the idea of accepting help felt foreign. But something in Sarah's expression told him the offer was genuine, not just professional courtesy. I appreciate that, but I should handle this myself, he said. Emma needs to see that her father can manage whatever comes up. Sarah nodded understanding, but handed him her business card. If you change your mind, or if you need anything else, call me. Single parenting is hard enough without trying to do it completely alone. Marcus pocketed the card and headed for the exit, his mind racing through possibilities. Emma was normally a quiet, gentle child who avoided conflict. For her to get into a physical altercation on her first day suggested something serious had happened. The drive to the school took 15 minutes through base traffic. Marcus used the time to calm himself, knowing that whatever had happened, Emma would need him to be steady and supportive, not angry or defensive. He had learned during Sarah's illness that children picked up on their parents' emotions like radar, and his reaction would influence how Emma processed whatever had occurred. The elementary school was a modern building with cheerful murals on the walls and a playground filled with military children from families all over the world. Marcus had hoped this environment would help Emma feel normal, surrounded by other kids who understood the unique challenges of military life. Principal Martinez met him in the main office, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who had dealt with hundreds of family crises over the years. Thank you for coming so quickly, Mr. Sullivan. Emma is in the counselor's office right now, drawing pictures and having a snack. She's calmed down considerably since the incident. What exactly happened? Marcus asked, taking the seat she offered across from her desk. Principal Martinez consulted a file in front of her. According to witnesses, including the teacher on playground duty, a 5th-grade boy named Tyler Morrison was teasing Emma about her mother during lunch recess. When she asked him to stop, he apparently said something about her mother being dead because she didn't want to live with Emma anymore. Marcus felt white-hot rage flash through him, the same protective instinct that had made him legendary in combat. Someone had deliberately hurt his daughter with words designed to wound her in the deepest way possible. And then, he asked through gritted teeth. Emma tackled him to the ground and started hitting him. It took 2 teachers to separate them. Tyler has a bloody nose and some scratches, but nothing serious. Pride and concern warred in Marcus's chest. Part of him was proud that Emma had defended herself and her mother's memory. Another part worried about her using violence to solve problems, especially when they were trying to build a stable life on the base. What's the school's position on this? Marcus asked. Normally, physical violence results in immediate suspension, regardless of provocation. However, given Emma's age, her recent loss, and the nature of the comments that preceded the incident, we're willing to work with you on an alternative consequence. Marcus nodded, grateful for the principal's understanding. What did you have in mind? We'd like Emma to write an apology letter to Tyler for using violence, and Tyler will be writing one to her for his cruel comments. Both children will spend tomorrow's recess in the guidance counselor's office talking about better ways to handle conflict. It seemed fair, but Marcus knew the real issue went deeper than school discipline. Emma was carrying grief and anger that no 8-year-old should have to bear, and today's incident was probably just the first sign of how that burden was affecting her. "Can I see her now?" Marcus asked. "Of course, but Mr. Sullivan, I want you to know that Emma's response was completely understandable. What that boy said was unforgivable, and she was defending something precious to her. We just need to help her find better tools for the next time someone tries to hurt her with words." Marcus nodded, standing to follow the principal down the hallway toward the counselor's office. Through the small window in the door, he could see Emma sitting at a child-sized table, carefully coloring a picture of a house with 2 stick figures standing in front of it. When she saw him, her face crumpled and tears started flowing again. Marcus opened the door and knelt down, letting her run into his arms. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she sobbed into his shoulder. "He said mean things about Mommy and I got so mad." "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus whispered, holding her tight. "Sometimes people say things that hurt us and it makes us want to hurt them back, but we have to find better ways to handle those feelings." As he held his daughter, Marcus realized that this was exactly the kind of situation that would have been impossible to handle from a forward operating base in Afghanistan. Emma needed him here, present and available, ready to help her navigate the complicated emotions of childhood loss. Admiral Richardson's mockery seemed even more foolish now. This was real action, the kind that mattered most. That evening, Marcus sat on Emma's bed as she worked on her apology letter to Tyler. She held her pencil with the intense concentration of someone performing surgery, carefully forming each letter in her best handwriting. "How do you spell violence?" she asked, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Violence," Marcus spelled out slowly, watching her write. "What are you going to say about it?" Emma chewed on her eraser for a moment, thinking. That violence isn't the right way to solve problems, even when someone says really mean things that make you angry. Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's very mature, sweetheart. What else?" "That I'm sorry I hurt him, but I'm not sorry for defending Mommy's memory." The distinction surprised Marcus. At 8 years old, Emma was learning to separate regret for her actions from shame about her feelings. It was a lesson many adults never mastered. "That's exactly right," he said, smoothing her hair. "We can be sorry for how we handle our anger without being sorry for feeling angry in the first place." Emma finished her letter and handed it to him to read. Her handwriting was careful and deliberate, each sentence showing more emotional intelligence than many grown-ups possessed. "This is perfect," Marcus told her. "I'm proud of how you're handling this." "Daddy," Emma's voice was small, "will I get in trouble like this a lot because I get mad when people talk about Mommy?" The question broke Marcus's heart. Emma was already anticipating future conflicts, already expecting the world to continue hurting her in the same way. At 8 years old, she was developing defenses against grief that no child should need. "Some people don't understand how to talk about death, especially kids your age," Marcus explained carefully. "They might say things that hurt your feelings without meaning to be cruel, but if someone is being mean on purpose, you can always walk away and tell a teacher." "But what if walking away doesn't make the angry feeling stop?" Marcus considered the question seriously. Emma's anger was justified and healthy, but she needed better ways to express it than violence. He thought about his own anger management techniques from his SEAL training, but 8-year-olds didn't have access to punching bags and 20-mile runs. "When I feel really angry, I count to 10 and think about something that makes me happy," he said. "Usually I think about you or about a funny thing Mommy used to do." Emma nodded solemnly, "Like when she used to put whipped cream on my nose when we made pancakes." "Exactly like that," Marcus smiled at the memory. Sarah had a gift for turning ordinary moments into celebrations, filling their small apartment with laughter and silly traditions. His phone rang, interrupting the moment. The caller ID showed Lieutenant Commander Chen's number. "I should take this," he told Emma. "Finish getting ready for bed and I'll come tuck you in." Marcus answered the phone in the hallway outside Emma's room. "Sarah Chen here. I wanted to check on you after this afternoon. How did the school meeting go?" Marcus was touched that she had called. Military families understood each other's struggles in ways that civilian friends often couldn't, but actual offers of support were still rare. Better than I expected. Emma got into a fight defending her mother's memory. The principal was understanding about the circumstances. Kids can be cruel, Sarah said sympathetically. My daughter Madison went through something similar when her father first deployed. Another kid told her that her daddy didn't love her anymore because he chose to leave. She came home crying and asking if it was true. What did you tell her? The truth. That sometimes people say things that aren't true because they don't understand military families. That her father's deployment was about serving his country, not about leaving her. Marcus appreciated Sarah's honesty. Too many military parents tried to shield their children from the realities of service life, but kids were smart enough to sense when adults weren't being truthful. Emma's learning that lesson the hard way, Marcus said, but I think she's stronger than I give her credit for. They usually are. Listen, I called because I wanted to invite you and Emma to dinner this weekend. Madison could use a friend who understands military life, and honestly, so could I. The invitation surprised Marcus. He had been so focused on being self-sufficient that he hadn't considered the possibility of building friendships on the base. But Emma did need connections with other military children, and Marcus was beginning to realize that his isolation might not be healthy for either of them. That sounds great, he said. What can we bring? Just yourselves, Saturday at 6. After hanging up, Marcus returned to Emma's room to find her already in bed, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. The elephant had been Sarah's last gift to Emma, given to her the night before she died with instructions to hug it whenever she missed her mother. Was that work calling? Emma asked as he sat down beside her. Actually, it was a friend inviting us to dinner this weekend. There's a little girl named Madison who's about your age. Her daddy is deployed, so she understands about missing parents. Emma's eyes brightened slightly. Will she be my friend? I hope so, sweetheart. But remember, making friends takes time. You have to be patient and kind. Emma nodded seriously. Like how you're patient and kind with me when I'm sad about Mommy. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Emma's ability to connect emotional lessons across different situations continued to amaze him. She was learning empathy by watching how he treated her, developing her understanding of relationships through their daily interactions. Exactly like that, he managed to say. As he tucked Emma in and turned off the lights, Marcus reflected on the day's events. Admiral Richardson's mockery had stung because it touched on his own insecurities about his choices. But seeing Emma navigate her first real crisis at the new school had reminded him why those choices were necessary. He was no longer Iron Ghost, the invisible warrior who could appear and disappear at will. He was Marcus Sullivan, single father and logistics coordinator, and his mission had changed completely. Instead of protecting strangers in foreign countries, he was protecting one little girl's ability to grow up feeling safe and loved. The next morning brought new challenges. Emma was nervous about facing Tyler and delivering her apology letter. Marcus had to report to Admiral Richardson as part of his regular duties, knowing that their previous encounter would make the interaction awkward. But when they arrived at the school, something unexpected happened. Tyler Morrison was waiting by Emma's locker with his own letter, his face showing genuine remorse rather than the defiant anger Marcus had expected. I'm really sorry about what I said, Tyler told Emma quietly. My mom explained that saying things about people's parents who died is really mean, even if you're mad. Emma handed him her letter and accepted his in return. I'm sorry I hurt you, she said simply, but I'm not sorry for being mad about what you said. Tyler nodded seriously. That's okay. I would be mad too if someone said something mean about my mom. Marcus watched the exchange with pride and amazement. Both children were learning lessons about accountability, forgiveness, and standing up for what mattered to them. It was a more mature resolution than many adult conflicts achieved. Later that morning, Marcus found himself face-to-face with Admiral Richardson again, this time in the Admiral's office for a scheduled briefing on supply chain logistics. The room was decorated with photos of Richardson at various military ceremonies, his career documented in glossy images that showed him shaking hands with politicians and fellow officers. Sullivan, Richardson said without looking up from his paperwork, I trust yesterday's family emergency was resolved satisfactorily. The tone was formal and cold, but not actively hostile. Richardson seemed to have decided to pretend their hallway encounter had never happened. "Yes, sir, thank you. My daughter is settling into her new school." Richardson nodded curtly and launched into a detailed discussion of procurement procedures and budget allocations. For 20 minutes, they worked through spreadsheets and delivery schedules with professional efficiency. It wasn't until the meeting was nearly over that Richardson's mask slipped slightly. "I heard your daughter handled herself well in a difficult situation," he said quietly, still not making eye contact. Marcus looked up, surprised by the comment. "Sir, children shouldn't have to defend their parents' memory, but sometimes they do. It builds character, I suppose." The admission was as close to an apology as Marcus was likely to get. Richardson was acknowledging, indirectly, that Emma's situation was more complex than his casual mockery had recognized. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied simply. "She's learning to be strong." Richardson finally looked at him directly. "Strength takes many forms, I've come to understand. Dismissing any of them is a mistake I won't make again." It wasn't a full retraction of his previous comments, but it was something. Marcus nodded respectfully and gathered his files. As he left the Admiral's office, Marcus realized that everyone was learning and growing from the previous day's confrontation. Richardson was questioning his assumptions about service and sacrifice. Emma was discovering her own strength and moral compass. And Marcus was beginning to understand that his transition from warrior to father didn't represent a loss of identity, but an evolution of it. Iron Ghost had been forged in the crucible of combat, shaped by violence and secrecy and the need to be invisible. Marcus Sullivan was being forged in the crucible of single parenthood, shaped by love and patience and the need to be present. Both identities required courage, just different kinds. Walking through the base corridors, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The confrontation with Richardson had forced him to articulate the value of his choices, and Emma's successful handling of her school crisis had proven that those choices were working. For the first time since leaving the SEALs, Marcus felt like he knew exactly who he was and what his mission entailed, and he was ready for whatever came next. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of autumn warmth that made military families grateful for stable assignments. Marcus and Emma walked up the path to Lieutenant Commander Chen's base housing, Emma carrying a bouquet of flowers they had picked from the base gardens. "Remember what we talked about," Marcus said gently as they approached the front door. "Be yourself, be polite, and give Madison time to warm up to you." Emma nodded seriously, smoothing down her favorite dress. She had spent an hour getting ready, determined to make a good impression on her potential new friend. Sarah Chen opened the door with a warm smile, wearing civilian clothes that made her look younger and more relaxed than she had in uniform. Behind her, a girl with dark pigtails peered out shyly from behind her mother's legs. "You must be Emma," Sarah said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Madison has been excited to meet you all day." Emma held out the flowers with the formal politeness Marcus had taught her. "These are for you, ma'am. Thank you for inviting us to dinner." Sarah accepted the flowers with genuine delight. "They're beautiful. Madison, would you like to show Emma your room while I finish cooking?" The two girls disappeared upstairs, leaving Marcus and Sarah alone in the living room. The space was decorated with a mix of military memorabilia and family photos, creating an atmosphere that was both professional and homey. "Can I get you something to drink?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Coffee would be great, thank you." As Sarah prepared the coffee, Marcus studied the family photos on the mantelpiece. Most showed Sarah and Madison with a tall man in marine dress blues, their faces radiating the happiness of a complete family unit. "That's David," Sarah said, noticing his attention. "He's been deployed for 8 months now, still has 4 months to go." Marcus heard the strain in her voice, the exhaustion that came from carrying the full weight of parenting alone while maintaining a demanding military career. "How are you managing it all?" he asked. Sarah handed him a coffee mug and sat down across from him. "Some days better than others. Madison's been acting out lately, testing boundaries and pushing limits. I think she's angry about David being gone, but she can't express it directly because she knows it's not his choice." Marcus nodded in understanding. Emma went through something similar when Sarah died. She was angry at her mother for leaving, but felt guilty about being angry because she knew Sarah didn't choose to die. How did you help her work through it? Therapy helped, Marcus said honestly. And time, and lots of conversations about how it's okay to feel angry about things that aren't anyone's fault. From upstairs came the sound of giggling, suggesting that Emma and Madison were getting along well. The sound made both adults smile. I have to ask you something, Sarah said, her expression becoming more serious. Yesterday's confrontation with Richardson has been the talk of the base. People are calling you a hero for standing up to him. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't trying to be heroic. I was just trying to make him understand that my choices weren't about cowardice or lack of commitment. But that's exactly why it was heroic, Sarah insisted. You defended something important without losing your temper or compromising your values. You showed everyone watching that there are different kinds of strength. Before Marcus could respond, the girls came running downstairs, their initial shyness completely evaporated. Daddy Madison has a fish tank, Emma announced excitedly, and her fish have names. Their names are Admiral Bubbles and Lieutenant Fins, Madison added proudly. Mommy let me name them after Navy ranks. Sarah and Marcus exchanged amused glances. Military children developed unique perspectives on the world, turning everything into opportunities to connect with their parents' careers. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally between adult topics and children's chatter. Madison told Emma about the challenges of being a military kid, including multiple moves and long parental deployments. Emma shared her own experiences with loss and starting over. Do you miss your mommy every day? Madison asked with the direct honesty of childhood. Yes, Emma replied simply. But Daddy says that missing someone means you love them, so it's okay to feel sad sometimes. Marcus felt proud of his daughter's emotional maturity and grateful that she had found someone who could understand her unique circumstances. After dinner, while the girls played board games in the living room, Marcus helped Sarah clean up in the kitchen. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, Sarah began, scrubbing a plate with more intensity than necessary. About making choices between military service and parenting. Marcus dried a glass carefully, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere important. I got my new orders this week, Sarah continued. Norfolk Naval Base. It's a good assignment, career-wise, but it means uprooting Madison again, pulling her away from any stability she's managed to build here. What are your options? I could request a delay, maybe find a way to extend here for another year. Or I could start thinking about the same choice you made, transitioning to a role that prioritizes stability over advancement. Marcus set down the glass and looked at her directly. There's no right answer, Sarah. Every family has to figure out what works for them. But don't you ever regret it? Don't you ever wonder who you might have become if you'd stayed with the SEALs? The question touched on thoughts that still kept Marcus awake some nights. He had been on track for senior leadership roles, could have been commanding teams and shaping operations at the highest levels of special operations. I wonder sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember that the person I'm becoming as Emma's father is just as important as the person I was as a SEAL, maybe more important. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, her hands stilling in the dishwater. David and I used to talk about this before he deployed. We always said we'd figure it out when the time came, but now that the time is here, I realize we never really planned for the emotional cost of these decisions. The military prepares us for a lot of things, Marcus said quietly. But they can't prepare us for the moment when you have to choose between the mission and your child's well-being. That's something every military parent has to navigate alone. From the living room came the sound of friendly argument as the girls debated board game rules. Their voices carried the easy familiarity of children who had instantly clicked, finding in each other the understanding that only shared experience could provide. They're good for each other, Sarah observed, smiling at the sounds of friendship blooming. Emma needs that, Marcus agreed. She needs to know that other kids understand military life, understand loss, understand that families come in different shapes. As the evening wound down, Marcus and Emma prepared to leave. The girls exchanged phone numbers with the serious importance that 8-year-olds brought to new friendships, promising to see each other at school on Monday. Walking back to their own housing unit under the base's streetlights, Emma chattered excitedly about Madison's fish and their plans to work on a school project together. Did you have fun too, Daddy? She asked as they reached their front door. I did, Marcus replied honestly. It felt good to talk to someone who understands our situation. Emma nodded sagely. Madison understands about missing people. That makes her a good friend. That night, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed, she asked a question that caught him off guard. Daddy, are you proud of the choice you made about leaving the SEALs to take care of me? Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer. Emma's question wasn't really about his pride. It was about her own feelings of responsibility for his career change. Emma, choosing to be your full-time father wasn't a sacrifice I made for you. It was a gift you gave me. I get to watch you grow up, get to be here for every important moment, get to help you become the amazing person you're going to be. How could I not be proud of that choice? Emma's smile was radiant in the dim light from her nightstand lamp. I'm proud of you too, Daddy, even if other people don't understand why you're not a SEAL anymore. What matters is that we understand, Marcus said, kissing her forehead. And we do, don't we? We do, Emma agreed sleepily. As Marcus turned off her light and closed her door, he reflected on the week's events. Admiral Richardson's mockery had forced him to examine his own feelings about his career change. Emma's fight at school had tested both their emotional growth. The friendship with Sarah and Madison had reminded them that they weren't alone in navigating the complexities of military family life. But more than anything, the week had confirmed what Marcus had known in his heart since the day he made the choice to leave the SEALs. Being Emma's father was the most important mission he would ever undertake, and he was succeeding at it in ways that mattered more than any military commendation. Iron Ghost had been a legend in the special operations community, a warrior whose exploits would be whispered about in classified briefings for years to come. But Marcus Sullivan was becoming something even more valuable. A father whose daughter would grow up knowing she was loved, protected, and valued above all else. Standing in his living room, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of single parenthood, Marcus smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that he had made the right choice, and he was ready for all of it. The mission continued, just with different parameters and a far more precious objective. And for the first time since leaving Special Operations, Marcus felt certain that Iron Ghost's greatest victory was still ahead of him, measured not in enemy casualties or successful missions, but in the confident, loving, resilient young woman his daughter was becoming. Some battles were fought with weapons and tactics. Others were fought with patience and presence and unconditional love. Marcus had mastered both kinds of warfare, and he was proud of the man both had made him.